welcome back to yet another edition of Behind the Lens. I am film critic, creator, and host of Behind the Lens, Debbie Elias. You can find my movie reviews and interviews around the globe, in the U.S. and abroad, in print and online, 24/7. But every Monday, I am right here on adrenalineradio.com, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And don't forget, if you miss the show live, you can find the show as a podcast on iTunes, on BehindTheLensOnline.net, on Stitcher. We also have a video complement that appears on YouTube about a week to 10 days after the show airs live. So never worry if you miss us. You can find us everywhere. And of course, if you're listening now and you want to watch the live stream, you can do so on Facebook on the adrenalineradio.com Facebook page, because our beloved and trusted station owner, Nick Fedoroff, loves toys and loves to stream things live. So check it out. Tune in, log on. We're on right now. But jam-packed show today, everybody. And during the night, I had to do a little retooling on today's show with the passing of Tab Hunter, a legend, an icon, one of the last bastions from the golden age of Hollywood. Several years ago, he had written an autobiography, Tab Hunter Confidential. It was then turned into a documentary, which was outstanding. In connection with that documentary, I had a chance to sit down with Tab and talk to him at length for well over an hour about his life, about the documentary, about the book. For us, it was a reunion of sorts, because the first time Tab ever met me, I was 8 months old. And it was on the sound stages at WFIL TV at 46 and Market in Philadelphia. So we got a good chuckle over that. But in light of his passing at age 86, his birthday would have been Wednesday. He would have turned 87. I thought it appropriate to pull out at least a small clip of my interview with Tab as he talks about a little about his upbringing and about the studio system. So take a listen.
Well, I tell you, I was very fortunate. I had a really terrific, wonderful German, hard-headed mother who was fabulous and downs. But I'll tell you something, I think it's terrific that, that there were boundaries, and I question a lot of that today. I think it started quite a few years ago, and Paris just became la-di-da-di-da, I have to be me, and, it went from there. I think, what's going on here? I kind of like the fact that there are boundaries. That was the wonderful thing about being part of the studio system. There was an aura of mystery about movie people when I was a kid. My gosh. Yeah. They were untouchables. It was a wonderful thing. And I thought, whoa, I'd love to be an actor. I fell into it. It was funny because my mother said nothing for show. And what do? I wind up in showbiz, for gosh sake. I was the end of that studio system. It was really interesting because, you were working for these people, these moguls like Jack Warner, Harry Cohn, Daryl Zanuck, Louis B. Mayer. I mean, they ran tight ships, and if you didn't play the game the way they wanted it, you were out, and someone else was in. It was that simple.
Well, and what I find about your career is the fact that, no, Jack Warner bent over backwards for you.
He was very good. He really was. And, the great thing I love is my sexuality was never discussed.
No.
It was a thread in the tapestry of my life.
Now, with this documentary, something that I found very touching are all of these stars from the golden days of Hollywood. You got Robert Wagner, you've got Connie Stevens, even critics like Rona Barrett and Rex Reed and Debbie Reynolds talking about you. How does that make you feel?
It made me feel very good, I've got to tell you. I was really thrilled when Alan asked. He said, I want to have, your friends of that time, your contemporaries, talk about Hollywood and about you. And I just think it's interesting because you don't see a lot of them anymore. But RJ is such a great guy. Debbie, I've noticed since she was just out of the Burbank High School blowing the French horn, for gosh sakes. Warner Brothers signed her and they dropped her, and she went to MGM and became a huge star. But things like that happen. Timing is everything, isn't it?
And And yes, timing is everything in Hollywood. And this is a sad time right now for everybody who loves classic film, who loves the classic era, and who loves Tab Hunter. My heart goes out to his longtime partner and producer, Alan Glazer. Alan and Tab were together for over 30 years. I had asked him if he hadn't been an actor, what would he have done? And he said, become a horse trainer. That was the greatest love in his life. But the one thing he wanted is, he said, I'm happy to be forgotten. Well, I've got news for you, Tab. Wherever you are, you will never be forgotten. So I will actually be pulling that entire interview and putting it up on behindthelensonline.net at some point this week. Now, let's move on to a little more upbeat, but no less psychologically thrilling and exciting interviews with a film called Seven Splinters in Time. It is mind-blowing. It is written and directed by Gabriel Judet-Weinshel. It stars Eduardo Ballerini, Lynn Cohen, Austin Pendleton, Greg Bennick, and Al Sapienza. It is about time travel. And needless to say, the idea of seven splinters in time is our main character, played by Eduardo, who is splintered into seven characters. And yes, one of the fascinating things with this film is that Eduardo plays all seven characters on this indie, low-budget, no-budget film. The film is absolutely outstanding. Visually, you are entranced. Cinematographer George Nicholas works so collaboratively with Gabriel. In addition, they've got over 300 visual effects, special effects shots in this film. 300. On an indie level film called a sci-fi noir meld, asking existential questions. I did some in-depth interviews the end of last week with Gabriel and Eduardo. Let me let you get a flavor right now. The interviews will be out later on behindthelensonline.net and a few other places. But for right now, take a listen first as I talk with Gabriel as to where did the idea for time traveling and seven splinters of a personality and this whole fantastical journey come from?
Where did the idea? What was the germ that sprouted this idea in your mind that you went, I've got to write a script like this, and then, I've got to make this?
Well, it was very cart before the horse. In an odd way, the film came about in an unconventional, very non-linear path. I had a few scripts that were making their rounds in Hollywood. I mean, that's actually ambitious to say in Hollywood because they didn't get that far. It was during the recession of 2008, so it was a really hard time for a fledgling screenwriter to get something greenlit. And out of that frustration, that sense that I was spinning my wheels, I just wanted to start capturing images. And I always have been a really visual filmmaker, and I had a lot of images in my head that were, frankly, just needed to get out or out of my mind. And I called up an old friend and collaborator, the cinematographer George Nicholas, and I said, we just have to start shooting. And at that point, we really didn't have a script. I think even the concept we didn't quite have. And some of those early images actually ended up in the film, the shot of the VHS tape washing up on the beach, and the shot of the woman butcher covered in blood. Mm-hmm. And from there, a sort of momentum took form, and I had this sort of conceit to make a film like a painter makes a painting. My mother's a painter, and I think growing up around that, sort of watching her artistic process, I learned something about how you can kind of live in the moment as an artist, and you respond to the line you're painting as you're painting it, or much the same way maybe a jazz musician is playing the solo and inventing the music in the moment, which is obviously a really cumbersome way to make a film, or high-risk way to make a film, because the resources it takes to make a film
if you waste them and you go the wrong direction, it's much more disastrous. But nonetheless, that was sort of my concept. So to answer your question, this is a roundabout way of answering your question about the script. It really developed in a organic, inchoate type of way, and it wasn't. It was only really maybe 2 weeks before we started principal photography that we had locked the script, and we had a lot of images for the film already shot. Mm-hmm. And I think hopefully that lends itself to the slightly more extemporaneous and organic feeling of the film. It doesn't feel so, if you think about like Sid Field's, rules of screenplay where there's these clear arcs, maybe it's a little more organic than that. Although I think we then tried to impose more structure both in the last minute screenplay writing and then in the editing.
Well, the beauty of having so many images initially, and I'm glad you mentioned the female butcher with the blood on her, because the way you then judiciously use that bright red in a few frames further on in the film, such as where you're tinting, the Polaroid-esque look of the yellow sun, the yellow wheat fields, the blue sky as the young couple are driving down the road. Really, key moments like that, and that stands out in your mind. And I think that probably aided in what you ended up doing with some of the visuals. But having so many images up front before a script, that really lends itself to the whole idea of fractured psyches and a metaphor for the moments and memories of your life. Because everything is not shot in 35 millimeter film. Everything is not shot on a smartphone now for today's millennials. Everything is not shot on a red epic. And here it's like we're going through time with this whole multimedia extravaganza, and it feeds the mind while we're getting to understand the story behind it.
Oh my gosh, it's so gratifying to hear somebody get that, because it's sort of it's an underlying theme of the film, and something George, our cinematographer, and I talked about a lot is that the film, there's sort of this underlying concept of the film that it's about film itself, and we really were trying to, in both being celluloid lovers and really like students of film, we were really invested in trying to show all these different mediums, both because we were really enamored with them. We wanted to play with all those different mediums. But like you said, it's really a film about memory, and anybody, living through the 20th and 21st century experiences memory in a weird way, refracted back through the mediums that have captured our memories. So, maybe an older generation will remember early black and white photographs, and then the next generation will remember, 8 millimeter home video, and then I grew up with, half-inch linear videotape, and then, kids younger than me are going to remember their iPhone videos. Mm-hmm. And so in a strange way, our memory is shaped by the medium that captured those memories. And I think that's exactly what we were trying to play with, is this idea that memory is this kind of collage of different textures. And that's how we experience it.
The cinematography within the different media that you're shooting with, your framing, the color, your lighting, the saturation, the tactile sense we get. You've got the white on white with additional shades of white in omphalos. You've got the desaturated grays and the ice cool bluish grays. When we first meet Darius in the police station, then you slowly add in a little more colors, things get fleshed out. Then you bring in Laurie Krupp's incredible production design and some of those great buildings once we get Austin Pendleton's character in there. So you've got the grandeur of the old world, and you feel the history of, by then, what we know as time travel. Just so exquisitely captured, Gabe. Beautiful.
Oh, thank you. One of the things George and I talked about is trying to make a contrast between the world of Darius's sort of fractured, anemic life and the world of his memories that he's trying to get back to, as this sort of this Edenic state that his late adolescence and early 20s and that kind of magical time that he's lost. It's like this lost paradise. So we really wanted that to be clear in both like the saturation levels, but also the textures. That stuff we purposely shot and filmed. The memories we wanted a very organic sense. And then we wanted, similarly, it was really helpful to shoot Darius's world, the world that he's sort of lost in this very bleached out, digital, pristine, very clean, soulless space. So there we were trying to figure out, we both had a lot of mixed feelings about the Red. This was maybe 2011. So the Red was, already a pretty viable camera to shoot a feature film on, but we still had a nostalgia for what 35 millimeter could do. And so we thought, okay, let's not try to hide the fact that we're shooting digitally. Let's contrast it with the textural richness of celluloid. And
that was the wonderful writer-director of Seven Splinters in Life, Gabriel Judet-Weinshel. We're going to come back to the clip I have of Eduardo Ballerini later on the show, because we've got BEN RAUCH holding on the phone right now to talk about the Emoji song. But I can't recommend Seven Splinters highly enough for you. It is thought-provoking. It expands your mind. It expands your perception of the universe and the world. And truly, you will be able to put Gabriel on the map as a director to watch because of his ability and his the inherent nature of his skill set in implementing visuals and mixing them and matching them and just turning out this exquisite emotional and visual experience. So we will come back to more of Seven Splinters in time, but right now we're going to welcome the one and only BEN RAUCH is with us again. Hello, Ben.
Hey, how you doing?
I am fine. I am so happy to have you back on Behind the Lens. How have you been?
Thank you. It's great to be back.
I mean, you've been a busy little bee since you were on with talking about Jersey Christmas. You this past Christmas, you were the keyboardist for Darlene Love on her Christmas tour from November to February.
Yep, that was a blast. She's amazing.
And of course, everybody just loves Darlene Love and can't get enough of her. Ever since David Letterman left the air, Christmas is not quite as merry without her.
I agree. Yeah.
But to catch her, you got to catch her on the road. But there you were with her for all those months. I mean, that is just outstanding.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a blast. It was just incredible. She's a legend, and she's worked with everybody. She's got stories about Elvis and people that basically started rock and roll. And she was involved in it. So it was crazy to be a part of that. And I'm still on board with her. There's going to be a tour coming up, and I'm still playing for her. So I'm looking forward to more dates.
Ooh, any idea when the next tour is?
She tends to tour for 9-10 months.
Yeah.
So, they haven't announced any official dates yet, but hopefully soon they will.
Oh my God, that for you as a singer, songwriter, actor, entertainer, to get to work with someone of Darlene's magnitude and with the history and wealth of background that she brings to the table, what does that do to you? What do you learn from working with her?
She's, you see, from a lot of different people that have longevity, what it is that it takes to have that, because that's what I aspire to. I want to be doing this when I'm 80 or 90 years old still,
Let's clarify that Darlene is not 80 or 90 years old.
No, she's not. She's 76, actually, believe it or not. And she looks like she's 50. But she's going to be doing it when she's 80 or 90 years old.
Yes.
She'll be doing it. She's professional and she's focused and she treats her workers well, and she's a family woman. She she doesn't drink or party or anything like that. I don't think she ever did. So that's what I try and do. I do love a good biscuit every once in a while. I'm not going to lie to you, but we can't be too hard on ourselves, I think.
So working with Darlene, I've got to ask you, and I've interviewed Darlene before, so I know how much fun she is. But I'm curious, did you ask her at all about playing Mrs. Roger Murtaugh in the Lethal Weapon franchise?
She talks a little bit about it. Yeah, she does. I mean, it's part of her her fame and what people know her from. But for me what's amazing about her is like there was so much she did that people don't know about that shaped rock and roll. Mm-hmm. She recorded hundreds of songs with Phil Spector, early on. And, creating the wall of sound and, like, just being around all those early people and, talking about, Elvis and, like, there's a story of her, like, actually you can find it online of her, like, talking about Elvis and, like, being in his trailer. And he's like, Darlene, I've never been with a black woman. And she's like, and you never will, or you'll never be with this one or, something like that,
And I can just hear her saying that, too. Oh, my.
Right. Yeah. She's a respectable lady. I mean, she doesn't compromise her morals.
No, she doesn't. She's got a very strict standard, and she adheres to that. And
That's right.
And I'm so excited for you getting this opportunity because you are such a gifted singer-songwriter yourself. I mean, Jersey Christmas.
Thank you.
I still love that and the music video. And now you've got the Emoji Song, which I can't tell you how many times I've listened to already and watched the music video. It's another.
Oh, thank you.
I am so in love with how much I love Jersey Christmas, but now with the Emoji Song and what you do with the music video and inserting all the little emojis throughout the video, it is just number one. It's eye catching and it's cute. But again, the song is great. As Dick Clark would have said, it's got a great beat and you can dance to it. And, and a testament to the Emoji Song is that you are the winner of the USA Songwriting Competition for Best Novelty Comedy Song for the Emoji Song.
Yeah. And actually, I just found out like 3-4 days ago, I got an American Songwriting Award for it as well.
Oh, my God. Well, while you're on the line here, I've got like a 30-second clip of the song I pulled out. So stay on the line, and we're going to play a little bit of the Emoji Song, and then we'll talk some more about it.
Fireworks and burgers and corn and fries with American flags every 4th of July. A center swim guy, canoe guy, a guy on ice skates, a pink heart, a purple heart, a heart that just breaks. But now she has left me, so please tell me why this happy face, squinty face is starting to cry. Oh, the answer was simple when her text did reply. I sent too many emojis for being a guy.
Yeah, okay. So how does a guy send too many emojis, Ben?
How does a guy what?
How does a guy send too many emojis? Was this song based on personal experience?
Oh, not at all. I don't even have a cell phone, Debbie. Not at all. Do you hear the sarcasm across the line? Of course, it's based on, not exact truth, you know what I mean? But I think sometimes we have to exaggerate the truth in order to see the truth, the real truth.
Right.
So, I mean, I think this is what we're going through nowadays where, we're being judged by, the capital, how many capitals we use in our text, how much bold we use or underlining we use in our emails. And, definitely the emojis or the bit emojis are a part of it, that is it too much? Is it too soon? How is it too many? Is it, not at 3 a.m. when, I'm trying to sleep or, there's all of that goes into relationships now. We're not being judged, by just our interaction on a live, interpersonal level. It's like how we use technology is also, we're being judged by that too, and how we use the artistry. If you want to get deep, how do we use the artistry of technology, which I believe is emojis.
Well, and what I love what you do in the music video is while you have emojis there, you also, in character, are acting out what would be the actual interpersonal, in-person relationship. Especially the farm animal one is just too cute. With you dressed as, Mr. Green Jeans with, the goats and the donkeys. And you cover the gambit here. I mean, the gambit, you've got, your fire department, your farmer, business. You just do everything so that people can actually see what the actual, if you get off your phone and get rid of emojis, what real life interaction might be. And I really love that contrast that you have going in the music video. I think it works fabulously. And then the song itself is just, it's wonderful.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was a blast shooting it, and there's this thing about, it's also masculine, feminine, like what masculine, feminine, and what's too feminine and how people judge you for that, or what's too masculine, and it's all through emoji, it's all through text, it's all through this phone relationship. And yeah, I mean, that was so much fun shooting on a real farm. And they say you should never work with kids or animals, but I took a chance, on having some real goats and donkeys in this video.
I mean, you were on football fields. You're everywhere in this thing.
Thank you.
How long did it take to shoot the music video, and how many locations did you actually have? I mean, you put, so many music videos, as you know, so many are shot on a soundstage or in one location, and then there's a lot of VFX afterwards. You have multiple locations.
Yeah. We were really lucky. I mean, that was part of the whole thing of the pre-production, looking for these places and scouting these places and finding them and allowing them, asking them, and them saying yes. Like the Bud Lake Fire Department, we shot in Bud Lake. That's where the monster truck place that was also the farm, was, and Bud Lake Fire Department was right down the road. And I know I wanted something like that, and they were so kind to us, and they let us, shoot there. And some of the real firemen are in the video. And, I didn't know, if they were going to let us take out that fire truck and hey, what do you want the fire truck? And I was like, oh my God, it's a dream come true. Can we light a house on fire? They're like, no, you can't do that.
Don't push your luck. They let you play with the fire truck.
Right. That's right.
Right.
Can I drink out of the hose? They're like, no, there's a water fountain right over there.
Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, but where can people hear and find the emoji song? I know the music video is on YouTube.
Yep.
Where?
If you go to Ben Rauch Music on YouTube, the song is also on iTunes and Spotify and anywhere, Amazon Music, anywhere that music is streamed or bought, it's there. My Instagram is BenRauch1, BenRauch1, and my Facebook is Ben Rauch Updates, and my home address, if you want to come by and I'll perform the song for you live and in person, is no, I'm joking. I can't give that.
Well, no,
I would only be able to do it 3 times, and I'd be tired.
Well, that's but that's okay. You're in New York anyway.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, but hey, but no, I'm gonna be heading, probably within the year. I'm looking at property in Jersey to go back and forth.
You are?
I am.
We'll talk because I know some real estate people in Jersey. I'm from Jersey originally.
Well, my grandparents, Dad had a house. The family still has the house down in Lake Barnegat area in southern Jersey, down near Beach Haven, Seaside Heights, and all that. Yeah. So
nice.
Yeah. So, I do like Jersey. I'm from Philly,
Me
but
too.
I like going down the shore.
Yes.
That's
They have fixed Asbury Park up so much.
Have they?
It's so beautiful. I don't want to tell too many people that because it's like I love going there, and then it's not going to get crowded, more crowded than it already is.
Oh, well.
But it's also really up and coming. Jersey City is really up and coming.
Really?
There's some amazing places in Jersey City. Yeah. Yeah, we shot actually downtown Yogurt, the yogurt shop that's in the video.
Uh-huh.
They're in Jersey City by Grove Street, and they've been so kind to us, allowing us to shoot there. And like I'm friends with the owner now, and they've been helping promote the video. It's amazing. So I mean, that area by Grove Street is incredible. There's tons of restaurants and just great people. People don't have too much of a Jersey accent because they're close enough to New York.
Mm-hmm.
So if that bothers you,
yeah. But no, it's like once I head back east, I'm going to want an in-person performance. So,
Come on by. we'll get together. Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm looking right now I'm looking to book some, I'm in the process of, booking, live performances for my, because this is part of a full album called Tales from the Turnpike.
Mm-hmm.
The full album is called Tales from the Turnpike. So that's coming out hopefully, in pretty soon, and I'm in the process of like booking performances and tours, and so hopefully I'm going to be doing a lot of live shows in the near future as well.
Hopefully you'll be doing them out here in LA too for all your fans out here.
I would love that. I'm working on that.
Well,
I'm working on that.
And how long before? Because you told me about Tales from the Turnpike before. I'm still waiting. Still waiting.
Yeah, it's coming.
It's coming.
I'm pushing this the emoji song, which is one of the first songs off the album, and just getting that out there, and that's like the teaser for the full thing.
Well, and so when you get the album out there, you will come back on the show.
I would love that.
I mean, I can't have you.
That would be wonderful.
You can't have an album out there and not come back on the show to promote it. That's just unacceptable.
I would love. Thank you. That I would love to come back. Yeah.
Oh.
You're a very good interviewer. I have to say that. You're very good. You're very good at what you do. You're a good conversationalist, and you ask good questions.
Well, thank you, Ben. I appreciate that.
Yeah. No, it's true.
I appreciate that. That means a lot to me. Especially when I know how many people that, you and other talent that you talk to all the time. And the fact that you do come back on the show makes me very happy.
Thank you.
Well.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to throw you off because we have another repeat customer following you, Fran Kranz.
Great.
Actor Fran Kranz, he's got his new film along with writer-director CASEY WILDER MOTT. They're going to follow you. And I got to say, you're a tough act to follow.
Well, thank you.
The emoji song is a tough act to follow, Ben.
Thank you.
Well,
I'm sure it's different. They're doing something different,
Well, that's true. That's true. But everybody, BEN RAUCH Music, Spotify, Amazon, the emoji song, get it, listen to it. You will get hooked. You will want to listen to it forever while I pester Ben about getting Tales from the Turnpike done.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on, Debbie.
Thanks, Ben. I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And that was the wonderful BEN RAUCH. And hey, if you want to see some of his film work, he's in Jersey Boys, directed by Clint Eastwood, and he plays one of the Jersey Boys. So, but right now, we're going to bring two fabulous people online, and we're going to shift gears, and we're going to talk a little Shakespeare with the incredible writer-director CASEY WILDER MOTT and Fran Kranz. Hello, boys.
Hey,
Hi, Debbie.
How are you?
I am so excited to talk to you guys again. We had so much fun last year when the film premiered at LA Film Festival. And, of course, Fran's been on the show in between. CASEY, you're lagging behind,
You got to invite me on more often, Debbie.
Yeah.
You guys have an open invitation for any time. I can't tell you, the minute I found out A Midsummer Night's Dream got distribution, I was actually shrieking when I saw the email about the distribution. I was so excited because you guys know how much. I mean, you were one of my top must-see films at LAFF last year. And as I have long said, I told you guys, I even wrote it, if you want people to like Shakespeare, they need to see this movie first, and they will fall in love with Shakespeare. And it's because of the interpretation that you guys bring to the table here. So I'm just congratulations on getting distribution so everyone can see it.
Yeah, thanks, Debbie. Well, it's a team effort, and you're part of the team, right? I mean, that write-up that you did for LA Film Festival was really critical for us, and we used it in the sales effort. And I imagine you've seen by now, we actually used one of your pull quotes in the official theatrical trailer. So we're really excited and honored.
I have not.
You haven't seen that?
I have not. Oh, my God. Wow.
Yeah, well, we figured you'd be excited by that.
Oh, God, thank you, guys. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. It's not often people get to turn the tables on me on my own show. You guys just did it. Oh, my God, thank you. Oh, that's
yeah, well, I'll make sure to send you a link as soon as we get off.
Oh.
And, you had such delightful things to say about the film. We felt it would be a shame not to sort of,
God.
plumb our feathers a little bit.
But, I've got to ask you, Casey, because now, Fran, you have done Shakespearean adaptations before as a performer. You did the wonderful one with Joss Whedon, Much Ado About Nothing, which I just thought that was fabulous as well. Integrating these films, these, age-old stories, because everything of Shakespeare's, we're going back into the 1500s. But to contemporize them. And you do that so beautifully with A Midsummer's Night Dream, Casey, in your adaptation here, much as Joss did with his adaptation of Much Ado. So I'm curious what the adaptation process was like in retaining, the language, retaining the story, but yet modernizing it for the 21st century audience and creating the incredible visuals, which, for my money still, one of the most spectacular expressions of color in a film, and the gradients of it, just absolutely beautiful. So for your process as a writer-director, Casey, what challenges did you face?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot packed in there. As a starting point, Fran and I have both been just lifelong, basically, Shakespeare nerds. And I discovered it early on in a film. My first exposure to Shakespeare was Zeffirelli's Hamlet. And then I got really into it on stage, but I'd always been, that kind of always felt like my entry point and my anchor point. And I love the sort of the tradition, not just of adapting Shakespeare for film, but specifically the tradition within that of doing these modern adaptations. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Joss's Much Ado About Nothing, which I think is a real high watermark. There's a couple other ones. I mean, probably the most iconic one is Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, which was a film I saw when I was in high school, and it just sort of blew me away. I was just at the age where I was ready to see something that was really going to change my trajectory. And I was really into film at the time and really into Shakespeare, and this was something that just felt like an explosion of those two worlds. And it took this thing that I think is unfortunately seen as kind of inaccessible and sort of effete and made it really cool and sexy and throbbing and colorful and musical. And it gave me a whole new appreciation for Shakespeare that I think, took my relationship to the work to a new level. So it's something I've wanted to do for a long time. And then in terms of the more specific, lead up to this film, I'd been working in the business for 10, 12 years, and I'd done a variety of things. I'd been on what I think of as the more transactional side of Hollywood. I'd worked at a talent agency and a film financier. I'd done a bunch of script development with some great filmmakers. So I'd seen sort of that side of the business. But I'd kind of always, like a lot of people, secretly harvested, an ambition to write and direct films myself. Mm-hmm. And, I cranked this one out. I knew I wanted to do some kind of Shakespeare thing. I tinkered with a few ideas. I thought that the way the characters and the plot and the themes of Midsummer Night's Dream could be reimagined as an LA story was really fitting. I mean, LA is an interesting kind of fairy tale place, right? There are these fairy tale characters who lead these very sort of larger than life existences. So it felt like the fit was right, Mm-hmm. And I'm always, Fran and I talked about this early on, I was really excited to have him as a collaborator. I'm pretty suspicious of any, particularly a Shakespeare modernization, because they can feel kind of pat.
Yep.
And I wanted to make sure that this didn't feel that way, especially to people who are familiar with not just this play, but, the work of Shakespeare in general. So when Fran read it and kind of fell in love with it and, attached himself to it immediately as not just a cast member, but a producer, that felt really validating. And that felt like, okay, great. Now we've got a shot to make this thing happen.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, Fran, as an actor, number one, you get this script, and it's, for most actors, if you're theatrically trained, of course, you've got Shakespeare in your blood. Other actors may have some trepidation about doing Shakespeare, but I think all actors, at some point in their career, they really want to do Shakespeare. You now have gotten the chance to do Shakespeare twice in modernized versions, but two very distinct versions. And here is Bottom. You know my love for your character of Bottom in this film and how you play him. So I'm curious about how your approach then became once you got involved with Casey and you saw what this script was.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, first of all, 2 is not enough, Debbie. That is not enough. I want a lot more Shakespeare on my resume. That's how I fell in love with acting, right? In high school, college, it was particularly the Shakespeare plays that I found this kind of depth, bottomless sort of opportunity in that changed my idea of what acting could be, and that it wasn't just something fun to do, but a real passion and something I could spend my entire life doing. That the sort of pursuit and challenge of it was fulfilling on that level, and that happened doing specifically Shakespeare plays. Mm-hmm. So I've always had this kind of love and debt to it, really. You know what I mean? That I'm always looking to do it, and I also love doing theater, and there's something about doing Shakespeare on film that kind of fulfills me in the way that the theatrical process does. And I'm not even going to begin to sort of think or sort of try and ramble on about why that might be here now, but it's just his work and his words are just so fulfilling. With Casey's adaptation, and I got to say, I love Much of Joss's Much Ado About Nothing. It's great, but the difference, I think, is that just happens to be a movie in a modern setting. Mm-hmm. That was a kind of necessity's the mother of invention kind of thing. Right. Joss had 2 weeks to shoot the thing, and there was no option but to shoot it at his house. And right. While it's wonderful in its sort of modern reimagining of the play, it's much more, it just happens to be at a 21st century home. You know what I mean? Whereas what Casey did, it's almost, it's essential. The play is where it is, and the adaptation. That Los Angeles is essential to the story, and in a sense, it's kind of in *Midsummer Night's Dream* is essential to the sort of structure of Hollywood that Casey was just talking about. Mm-hmm. So there's almost this kind of symbiotic relationship to the two parts in what Casey did, and which I think is a really kind of transcendental adaptation, something that's sort of much more inspired than just a film that happens to take place in a certain environment or time period, as opposed to the time period or the environment actually changes the way you think about the material and vice versa. I mean, I will never be able to look at this play the same way because of how Casey has rethought it and reconceived it. The same way I grew up in Los Angeles, it's my home. I don't look at L.A. the same way anymore because of Casey's reconceiving of Los Angeles through this play. There's this kind of wonderful mutual evolution that sort of happened here with these two things. So as an actor, this was kind of a dream job because I got to be fulfilled in that kind of core sort of that level for me, that kind of that sort of nascent sort of, this is how it all started for me. I love Shakespeare, love doing it this way. So to do it on film about the city I grew up in, there were just so many kind of angles about this, and about the business I work in, on and on and on. There were so many angles that made this a really fulfilling, wonderful sort of project for me, special project.
Well, because you're also a producer, Fran, and you, Casey, is writer, director, and a producer, I've got to bring up, because the visuals and the interpretation and the reimagination of Los Angeles and the play are it is, visually it's tactile, it's colorful. It's a I said before, it's a pantheon of visual delights. I've got to bring up your cinematographer Daniel Katz and your production designer Glen Hall, and the importance of them in the structure and design and composition of this film.
So Dan was actually someone I had met through Fran, and that was, that was part of Fran. He brought a lot of value to the project beyond just himself and his enthusiasm, like particularly in the arena of the cast that he helped get me access to. I mean, one of the sort of quirks about how this film came together was we didn't have a casting director until like 10 days before we started shooting. And we had 90% of our cast in place at that point because Fran and I just kind of did it ourselves. And it was sort of this, mini miracle that we ended up with this just fabulous, fabulous collection of actors, but really a testament to Fran. And as part of that, he also brought in some other people, some department heads, specifically Dan. And Dan was a guy who, I'd looked at a lot of his previous work, and we'd, gone out to lunch and dinner and gotten to know each other a bit. And I was really impressed with his artistry. He's like a lot of cinematographers. He's a real artist, and he's very, very committed to the quality of what he does. He'd worked on commercials that had big budgets, and then he'd also worked on indie films that had no budget. So I knew that he was going to be able to work within the context of what we were going to be working with. And Fran should probably speak a bit more about Daniel as well, since they have a long-standing relationship. And then Glen was also just, kind of a stroke of luck. He was brought in by the line producer, a guy named Doug Matica. And Glen, I met with 4 or 5 different people, and honestly, they all had good work. They all had good resumes. Glen was kind of just the guy I liked most personally. He seemed very sort of at ease with what we were doing. A lot of people sort of, I would say jokingly, but nonetheless sort of expressed some sort of reservation or trepidation about the Shakespeare thing. And Glen just came in and he's like, "This is cool, man. Like I have a handle on this. Here's my boards. Here's what I want to do. Here's what I'm thinking." And I really like that. I really like that he didn't seem intimidated by the material.
Yeah, because
he did such an incredible job. He built sets in 24 hours, which is sort of typical of and that happens on an independent film shoot. You're putting together rooms and homes and things like that. But to build Titania's Bower or something is just a whole nother level of sort of commitment and imagination and just hard work. So Glen was constantly blowing me away with what he was putting together under the circumstances and just the sort of detail and imagination sort of that he had. It was really impressive, the work Casey and Glen did together. And Daniel, I've been a huge fan of Daniel for a long time. He shot the Oscar-winning short Curfew, which my good friend Sean Christensen, Andrew Napier, Sean produced or directed, wrote, and starred in. Andrew helped produce. And so there were a lot of guys in this kind of mutual friend group that we were drawing on. And this, in basically under a year in which from script to screen we started shooting. I think we were in principal photography faster than sort of any project I've known about it in terms of when you actually get the script. So that was really impressive. So all these guys kind of came together because of this enthusiasm over the script Casey produced. Pretty great.
And I have to mention with Daniel. For anybody out there who has not yet seen the film Vanishing of Sydney Hall, Daniel's also the cinematographer on that. And it's like, talk about seeing the range, but the visual storytelling that he does with lighting and lensing and framing. Be it Midsummer Night's Dream or Vanishing of Sydney Hall, this will show you the great range and talent that Daniel has.
He's fantastic,
Because, of course, I had seen Midsummer's Night first, and then I saw Sydney Hall just a few months ago before it got its release, and I was blown away. I was already impressed with Daniel's work, but then to see the differentials that he brings and the nuance and his range, that's just, it sold me forever on Daniel.
Yeah.
As a cinematographer.
Totally. Another Sean Christensen movie there right away. Not to plug Sean so much,
You can plug whoever you want. You guys can plug whoever you want. Somebody that I got to plug that is in Midsummer's Night is Hamish Linklater.
Yeah.
And he just finished doing the live performance with Tom Hanks of Shakespeare.
Casey and I saw the other night, or what was that? A couple weeks ago now. Yeah, I think it's closed now.
It closed on July 1st. And he's another performer. He has a great grasp of Shakespeare and the cadence of Shakespeare. Was that something that was a strong consideration when you were casting this film? Because there are people that I've seen do Shakespeare and they do not get the pentameter, they don't get the cadence vocally, and it's a train wreck. But everyone here, the rhythm flows with the dialogue, the pickup, the delivery. And I imagine that had to have come into play for you when you were doing casting and in rehearsals, as brief as they are in a low-budget, no-budget film.
Yeah.
Honestly, it did and it didn't. It did in that, of course, early on we said, God, we'd like to work with great actors and specifically with actors who have some grounding in this material. But because, the casting was kind of an informal process, a very sort of, friend of a friend kind of a process, there was no kind of grand design. Fran and I went out to lunch and made a list, and then went back home and started making phone calls. And I think we were lucky. We were extremely lucky with the people that we got. And of course, working with, Finn and Hamish and Lily and of course, Fran, people like that who were super comfortable with the material was great, and I think that the proof is in the pudding. You just have to watch the film to see how facile in a good way and, how comfortable with the language they are. But then, we also worked with some people who I think turned in equally compelling performances like Rachel Lee Cook and Ted Levine, who had done almost no Shakespeare, but in Rachel's case, none. And I was actually a little concerned about that early on, and Rachel shared that concern, because everyone wants to do a good job. But I remembered this interview I read with Ken Branagh years ago when he had sort of, very quickly and successfully made the transition from feted British stage director to, Hollywood filmmaker. And he said, and, he's obviously as someone who takes Shakespeare as serious as anyone, right?
Oh.
It's been his whole life. And he said when he did his Much Ado About Nothing, there were a couple people that he worked with who had done little to no Shakespeare on that film, which was a very well-received, successful movie, and he wasn't worried about it at all. He thought that the interplay, he said, as long as they were good actors and they showed up to do the work and I can work with them to make it all make sense, the interplay between them and the people who do really have the grounding and the tradition is really electric and really interesting and creates the kind of thing that is another way to differentiate something like this from a stage play where, you're never going to see a Shakespeare stage play at a high level that doesn't have experienced Shakespearean actors, So I thought that was really an interesting insight, and I sort of, I imported that idea into the casting on this film as well.
I'm gled you brought up Ted Levine because...
sorry.
No,
I was just going to say, I remember Casey mentioning, in the casting process, there was always, I thought an idea that it would be beneficial to have a mixture of backgrounds, you know what I mean? That at one point, if it was going to be Titania or Oberon, maybe with some more training or classical training or Shakespeare, and then have the lovers be, from kind of another sort of school of acting or different kind of, more traditional film or television actors. So I know that to have it be eclectic was an idea that we thought would be good and important to the film. How it ended up falling together, that you have, with Finn, Lily, and Hamish, three really, really seasoned, New York Shakespeare actors in the lover sort of category. That just sort of, I think, ended up the way it did, like he said, but who was sort of ready and available. But I know that the idea that it bringing in different textures into performance was always going to be a good thing for the movie that's in the story that really is about different worlds, coming together.
And I have to say...
And that, I know you want to talk about Ted, Debbie, but I want to, because you mentioned the fairies, Fran, I got to say, I think where that really shows up most clearly is with Mia and Saul, neither of whom have really done, much theater. Saul had done some. Mia hadn't done any since high school. But I think because they're both musicians and poets, they are as kind of, in a very different way, but they are as adept and as compelling with this material as the people who have done, 20, 30 plus Shakespeare plays. They just have a different relationship to the language that's obviously more musical in its texture. And I think it's beautiful to see the contrast between the way that, the quartet of lovers, the quintet of the mechanicals, and the fairies in the woods, they all have these kind of different approaches to the words. And I know you want to talk about Ted, so let's get into that.
Well, he was the biggest surprise for me in this film. Seeing Ted do Shakespeare was the biggest surprise for me. That was a real shocker to me. But he felt totally at home. Similarly, for Mia and Saul as Titania and Oberon, they were just perfection. The fluidity and the languid nature of their performance and their delivery was exquisitely done.
Yeah, I think it's
cool. They're amazing. And they, I had wanted a very musical adaptation from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And Mia's a friend of mine, so I reached out to her, and she was interested, and then she got Saul involved. And as a secondary consideration I'd had in the back of my mind, maybe because they're musicians, and Saul has a little bit more experience as an actor. He's a real Renaissance man. I mean, he does just about everything, But Mia's really more kind of categorically a musician who told me, she's like, look, I haven't acted literally since high school, but I think this is really cool and I want to be involved. And that for me was more of a producerial strategic play, to get a great album together. But, a great side benefit of it is that they, as we were talking about, they had this sort of extraordinary take on the material. As far as Ted goes, Ted was like pretty much the last guy cast. He was, I mentioned earlier that we brought a casting director in at the last minute because we had a couple roles that hadn't been filled, and that was one of them. And, he was one of the only people I didn't meet with beforehand. I met him on set when he showed up. I loved working with him. And he was also, like a lot of other people, he was very upfront. He's like, look, I haven't done a lot of this stuff. I'm going to sort of, hope that I can rely on you to help me out, off camera and figuring this stuff out. And I said, of course. But I think there was a moment and a side between me and Ted on about like the second day of his time on set that was like, it revealed so much to me about him as an actor. Was he said, you know what, even though Theseus is kind of like the power figure of all of these people, like I get that the play is like not in the least bit about him. And like, I'm really supposed to be here to help tell the story of all these other people, you know, which was a great insight for him as an actor. And I think I could see it in his performance. He was very gracious about like, how do I make these other people shine, which is really like an old as time canard in the acting world.
Yeah.
Like, the way to make yourself better is to make your scene partners better. And Ted just kind of knew that intuitively with the material.
I'm curious, how challenging was the editing of this film? Because here again, the pacing and, and the fact that true Shakespearean, you broke it into acts for us, act 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but how challenging was the editing process?
It was challenging for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
That's a knowing laugh from Fran. The main reason it was challenging was because I had a very clear editorial aesthetic in mind when we set out to make the film. Even before we started editing, when I scripted it, I had a specific sort of editorial vision in mind. And, I ended up, there ended up being 3 editors on the film, one of which was me. And the first editor was this guy, Curtis Clayton, who we were really lucky to land. I mean, he's sort of like a legend in the indie film world. He was, Gus Van Sant's editor for a long time, and then he did a couple movies with Andrew Dominic, and he did Vincent Gallo films. And he, like I was saying about Dan, he's like a very, very serious artist. And, working with him was really rewarding. But then we also got to a place where, we really had to dig into the nitty-gritty of how do you make this funny little jump cut or this funny little in and out cut or this funny little flash forward, or this odd, stock footage sequence, because we were working with a lot of texture, we were doing a lot of different things. And, we brought in another guy to help with that who just had sort of the patience to really do all of the trial and error. And he ended up Saul Herkitz, he ended up adding, a huge amount of value because even though he was younger and less seasoned than Curtis, he just has very good instincts, and he was like a terrific collaborator. He didn't have problems spending 10 hours on something trying to get it just right. So it was a challenge, but like I think it worked out. I'm proud of a lot of things about this film, but like pretty high on the list is how the editing unfolds. I think there's some really, not to sound pompous, but I think there's some pretty sophisticated stuff in there, for a first-time director. And like that's the stuff as the director that I'm sort of, I'm comfortable sort of hanging my spurs on the most.
Well, I can honestly tell you that watching this film from script to screen, it belies you being a first-time director, Casey. Looking at this film,
Thanks.
one would never know this was your first feature.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm flattered. I appreciate it. Of course, as the director, I think this is the case for anyone. Like all I see with the film is all the stuff that's wrong with it.
We're not going to talk about
so,
that.
I mean, it's just the pure ambition, I think, and the kind of imagination behind what you did, Casey, in terms of the story, always blew me away from the beginning. And to see it on screen, absolutely, I agree with you, Debbie. It's really, really, really cool and exciting. And I think with the editing, another thing that I don't know if this was that challenging, honestly, Casey, but with Shakespeare, we're lucky with sort of modern colloquial language and editing films. You overlap. You can kind of be on one person's or another person's line. There's so much freedom in the way we speak today when it comes to in editing a film. Mm-hmm. And with Shakespeare, there's a certain reverence for the language, even when you're doing a modern adaptation, and even when you're kind of having fun with it the way we do in this film. And there's still, I think, boundaries and kind of obstacles that the language imposes on how you have to listen to it and hear it and even see it. That must have been a whole another challenge in the editing process that doesn't make anything any easier. So I was so impressed with how it came out, and even from, and I think it's different even from LAFF than it is now, right? I think when you first saw it,
oh yeah,
slightly tweaked.
It has been retweaked a little.
And that was, that's where Curtis was really incredible, is because Curtis originally was an actor. He came to LA 20 whatever years old and was an actor for a year, and then he sort of, he ended up as an editor. So he really understands the value of like cutting for performance. Mm-hmm. And, he did a great job to that effect. All the stuff in the second act that's kind of trickier and flashier, mm-hmm. which for me it wasn't supposed to be gratuitous. It was like the second act, it's very explicitly stated in the play, is like kind of a dream, and then the characters start asking each other, was that a dream? Was I dreaming? Were we having some sort of weird collective dream? So I thought, it was important to utilize the tools you have in filmmaking that you don't have in theater to create a dreamlike atmosphere, for mm-hmm. the characters to populate. And I thought, well, particularly on a low budget, the easiest way to do that is to, throw some sort of off-center editing in there.
Right.
And then, like the dream within a dream and the play within a play. Midsummer Night's Dream is very famous for the play within a play, mm-hmm. which is kind of a common Shakespearean device. But, what's kind of less obvious about it are the ways that it's a dream within a dream. And mm-hmm. I wanted to explore that as well. So, editing was just the way to make it happen.
Well, again, as I have said about this film since the very beginning last year, everyone should see this film and they will fall in love with Shakespeare. This should be required viewing in junior high school before you stick a copy of Merchant of Venice in somebody's hand to read. And they will love Shakespeare if they see this film first before anybody starts just sticking words on a page in front of them. I'm sure I speak for Fran as well. Like we're so happy to hear that, because that was, he and I, explicitly talked about this early on. Like that was one of our agenda items, with the film. We both discovered Shakespeare early on. It was just really through good fortune more than anything else. And, there is a way to present it to someone, that will allow them to have an enriching lifelong relationship with it. And if, not to sound cliche, but like if this film can do that even for one person, like I think that's fantastic. Mm-hmm. Well, unfortunately, guys, we are out of time today. But before I let you go, the film opens this Friday at the New Art in L.A. where else is it opening so other people can see it?
Well, the easiest thing to do is to go to the website, MIDSUMMERNIGHT'S.com, and that has the full release schedule for the summer. We're playing in about half a dozen markets right now: Boston, Philly, DC, San Diego, New Orleans. We're working on releases in Chicago and New York and the Bay Area. And, because we're sort of plugged into the landmark system, hopefully if we have a robust number this weekend, which all of your listeners can, go out and help us accomplish, we'll get to book, another couple markets. So, we're really excited about it and bringing it to audiences. And, it's been a thrill all along.
Well, it has been a thrill to be on part of this journey with you guys. I am just so excited and so happy for you, and to see this film now making its way out there for everyone else to see. Congratulations.
Thanks, Debbie.
Oh, you guys are something else. And, of course, you'll both be back on the show again. I know that. That goes without saying.
Love it.
Yeah, of course. Don't worry about it.
Guys, thank you so much, and I will talk to you again soon. And everybody, A Midsummer Night's Dream.
Thanks, Debbie.
In theaters Friday. So, thanks,
this
guys.
Friday, come see it.
And that would have been
Come see it, everyone. Thanks, Debbie. Thanks, Fran.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
Bye. And that was Casey Wilder Mott and Fran Kranz, A Midsummer Night's Dream, in limited release this Friday and expanding from there. Go to the website, MIDSUMMERNIGHT'sDreamMovie.com, to get the complete release schedule. That is all the time we have today. We are 6 minutes over right now. We did not get to go back to Eduardo Ballerini talking Seven Splinters. I'm going to plug that in next Monday, as a matter of fact, so you can at least hear some of that if you don't check out what I eventually get out later tonight on Seven Splinters with Gabe and Eduardo. And look for BEN RAUCH and the Emoji Song. Until next week, I'm Debbie Elias. This is Behind the Lens.